The scalding pasta cascaded down her chest, the marinara sauce searing through her crisp white uniform like liquid fire. Rachel Rollins' scream shattered the refined atmosphere of the upscale cafe, a raw sound of pure agony that made crystal glasses vibrate on marble tables. She stumbled backward, hands clutching at her burning skin, her neat bun coming undone as tears flooded her eyes. Blisters were already forming beneath the fabric. And Wesley Bonner smiled. Not just smiled, he laughed, a full-throated, delighted laugh, as he stood there with the empty plate still in his hand, his crisp white dress shirt with its casually unbuttoned collar catching the afternoon light. The Patek Philippe on his wrist cost more than Rachel would earn in 5 years. His designer loafers probably exceeded her entire year's medical insurance. And he was laughing at her pain like she was a character in some comedy sketch written for his personal entertainment. "That's what you get for bringing me the wrong order, you incompetent little..." His voice dripped with contempt as he tossed the plate onto the table with a careless clatter. "Maybe now you'll learn to pay attention when your betters are speaking." The cafe froze. Not a single fork moved. Not a single conversation continued. The other servers pressed themselves against the walls, faces blank with practiced neutrality, knowing that one wrong move, one word of protest meant termination without reference. The wealthy patrons suddenly found their phones fascinating, their meals requiring intense concentration. In this glittering corner of the financial district, Wesley Bonner was untouchable royalty, the heir to the Bonner Industries empire, a man whose family's billions had long ago elevated him beyond such inconvenient concepts as consequences or basic humanity. But in the corner booth, something changed. A Korean man in an expensive dark gray 3-piece suit carefully set down his espresso cup. The movement was unhurried, deliberate, the gesture of someone who controlled entire rooms without raising his voice. His slicked-back black hair caught the light as he tilted his head, and the intricate tattoo covering his entire neck seemed to writhe in the shadows. Dark ink that spoke of allegiances most people only whispered about after midnight. Min-seok's expression remained perfectly neutral. His sharp features showed nothing. No anger, no surprise, no judgment. But his eyes transformed. Something cold and calculating flickered behind them. A darkness that had seen violence in forms Wesley Bonner couldn't begin to imagine. The kind of focus that belonged to men who had killed before breakfast and negotiated empires before lunch. He rose from his seat with unhurried, deliberate intent. Wesley Bonner, still chuckling at his own cruelty, hadn't even noticed. He was too busy pulling out his phone, probably to text his friends about the hilarious incident with the clumsy waitress. Min-seok moved with the quiet certainty of a predator. His polished shoes made no sound on the marble floor. His tailored suit jacket didn't shift an inch out of place. To anyone watching, he looked like just another businessman crossing the room. But Rachel, through her tears of pain, saw his eyes, and for just a moment she saw something that terrified Wesley Bonner's world far more than anything the billionaire could imagine. She saw consequence. Min-seok stopped 3 feet from Wesley's table. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Wesley finally looked up from his phone, irritation crossing his face at being interrupted in his moment of triumph. "Can I help you with something?" Wesley asked with exaggerated boredom, barely glancing at the man before him. Min-seok didn't answer immediately. He simply looked at Wesley with those cold, calculating eyes, then at Rachel, still trembling in pain, then back at Wesley. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, controlled, absolutely lethal in its calm. "You just made a mistake." Wesley's smile widened, "Oh, did I? And who exactly are you supposed to be? Her boyfriend? Her knight in shining armor?" He laughed again, that same mocking sound. "Listen, buddy, why don't you go back to your little corner and—" Min-seok moved. Not violently, not dramatically. He simply reached into his jacket with one hand, a movement so smooth, so practiced, that 3 of the other diners who actually recognized what they were seeing went pale and quietly stood to leave. He pulled out a business card, set it on Wesley's table with 2 fingers. The gesture was almost gentle. Wesley picked it up, glanced at it, and froze. The color drained from his face like someone had opened a valve. His hand started to tremble. The card showed nothing but a phone number and a single word in Korean characters. But Wesley Bonner, despite all his privilege and arrogance, had spent enough time in the darker corners of the city's elite circles to know exactly what that symbol meant. Jopuk, Korean Mafia. And not just any member. The tattoo on Min-seok's neck, the way he carried himself, the absolute certainty in his movements. This wasn't some low-level enforcer. This was someone who gave orders that ended empires. "You and I," Min-seok said quietly, his accent barely noticeable, "are going to have a conversation about respect, about consequences, about what happens when you hurt people who can't fight back." He glanced at Rachel, who a server was now helping toward the back. "But first, you're going to pay for her medical bills, every cent. You're going to apologize, and then—" He leaned down, his voice dropping to a whisper that only Wesley could hear. "Then you're going to learn exactly who you just challenged." Wesley tried to speak. Nothing came out but a strangled wheeze. Min-seok straightened, adjusted his suit jacket with meticulous precision, and turned to walk toward Rachel. His posture never changed, his expression never shifted. He moved like a man who had already calculated every possible outcome and found them all acceptable. Behind him, Wesley Bonner sat paralyzed in his chair, the business card burning in his hand like evidence of a death sentence he'd just signed for himself. The other patrons slowly returned to their meals, but the cafe would never feel quite the same. Something had shifted in the balance of power. Something ancient and dangerous had awakened, and Wesley Bonner, for the first time in his spoiled, cruel life, realized that money couldn't buy him safety from the consequences standing across the room. Min-seok had watched enough, and the Bonner family's reign of untouchable privilege had just begun its collapse. Welcome to Afro Soul Storybook. This isn't some fairy tale romance where the prince saves the princess. This is blood and power wrapped in Armani suits. This is a legacy stolen and a woman ready to burn the world to take it back. Subscribe to watch more of our daily stories and comment where you're watching from. I want to know how far this storm is spreading, and hit that like button.
The ambulance arrived within minutes, but Min-seok was faster. By the time the paramedics wheeled Rachel toward the doors, he had already made 3 phone calls. The first ensured she would be treated at the city's best private hospital. The second guaranteed her medical bills would be paid in full, no questions asked. The third was to someone Wesley Bonner would meet very soon, though he didn't know it yet. Wesley remained frozen at his table, the business card still trembling in his grip. He watched Min-seok move through the cafe like he owned it, which, in a sense, he did. Every building in this district paid tribute in one form or another. Protection fees, consultation charges, the price of doing business when the Jopuk decided your neighborhood was under their umbrella. Min-seok returned to Wesley's table and sat down without invitation. He moved with the same deliberate grace, folding his hands on the white tablecloth between them. Up close, Wesley could see the details of the neck tattoo, a dragon intertwined with cherry blossoms, the artwork so intricate it must have taken months to complete. In Korean organized crime, such tattoos weren't decoration, they were resumes written in ink. "Your name is Wesley Bonner," Min-seok began, his voice conversational, almost friendly. "You're 38 years old. You have a penthouse at the Meridian Tower, Unit 4207. You drive a Bugatti Chiron, license plate BNR-LGCY. Your father is Victor Bonner, CEO of Bonner Industries." He paused, studying Wesley's increasingly pale face. "You also have $17 million in an offshore account in the Cayman Islands, account number ending in 4739, opened 3 years ago to hide income from a real estate scheme in Brooklyn that displaced 200 low-income families." Wesley's throat worked, but no sound emerged. "You have a gambling problem," Min-seok continued, his tone never changing. "You owe the Marchetti family $1.2 million. You've been paying it down slowly, which is why they haven't broken your legs yet. You have 3 DUIs that your father's lawyers made disappear. You assaulted a college student at a party in 2019. She was paid $200,000 to stay quiet." He tilted his head slightly. "You also have a warrant out for your arrest in Singapore for securities fraud, but your passport was flagged and amended by someone in the State Department your father knows. Quite the resume, Mr. Bonner." The cafe had emptied except for 2 men at the front entrance and 2 at the back. They weren't eating, they weren't reading menus, they were simply standing, hands folded, watching, waiting. Wesley finally found his voice. "Who the hell are you?" "I'm the man you just disrespected by hurting someone under my protection." Min-seok leaned back in his chair. "Rachel Rollins works 3 jobs to support herself and her younger sister. She sends money home to her mother in Ohio every month. She has never been late on a payment, never missed a shift, never complained about entitled customers like you." He paused. "Until today, I didn't know her name, but I know her now, and that means you have a problem." "Listen," said Wesley, his voice cracking slightly. "I don't know what you think you're going to accomplish, but my father—" "Your father," Min-seok interrupted, "has his own problems he doesn't even know about yet." He stood, adjusting his suit jacket with meticulous care. "You're going to transfer $500,000 to an account I will provide. That money will cover Rachel's medical expenses, her lost wages, and compensation for the trauma you inflicted. You have 24 hours. And if I don't?" Min-seok smiled for the first time. It was not a comforting expression. "Then I'll take it from you personally, along with other things you value, like your freedom, your reputation, your kneecaps." He placed a different card on the table, this one with a bank routing number. 24 hours, Mr. Bonner. The clock is already running." He walked out of the cafe without looking back. The 4 men at the entrances followed him like shadows. Wesley sat alone at his table, surrounded by abandoned meals and the lingering silence of witnesses who would never speak of what they'd seen. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. 23 hours, 58 minutes. His hand shook as he typed a message to his father. The file arrived on Min-seok's desk that evening, thick as a phone book, compiled by his intelligence network, a web of informants, hackers, and former government agents who owed him favors that could never be repaid in money alone. He read it in his office above a legitimate import-export business, the room dark except for a single lighted lamp. Rachel Rollins had a sister, Keisha, 26 years old, graduated with honors from City College with a degree in journalism, passionate about labor rights, had written several articles exposing corporate malfeasance in the garment industry. 3 months ago, she'd landed an interview at a textile factory owned by a Bonner Industries subsidiary. 2 weeks after that, she'd filed a formal complaint with the Department of Labor alleging illegal working conditions, wage theft, and possible human trafficking. 1 week after that, she'd disappeared. The police report said she was a voluntary missing person, no signs of foul play, probably just left town, started a new life somewhere else. Her apartment was cleaned out, her bank account closed, her phone disconnected. But Min-seok had read enough police reports in his life to know when they'd been written by cops on someone's payroll. The detective who'd handled the case had retired 6 weeks later with a new boat and a down payment on a beach house in Florida. Quite the pension for a 30-year veteran who'd been living paycheck to paycheck his entire career. He made a call. "Find her," he said in Korean. "Use whatever resources necessary. I want to know where Keisha Rollins is, and I want to know what the Bonners did to her." The voice on the other end asked no questions. Within the Jopak, when Min-seok gave an order, you executed it. Questions were for people who didn't understand how survival worked. He hung up and stared at Keisha's photograph in the file. She had the same eyes as her sister, intelligent, determined, full of hope that the world could be better if people just tried hard enough. He'd watched that hope die in too many faces over the years. He'd watched it extinguished by men like the Bonners, who viewed human beings as disposable resources in their pursuit of more wealth they could never spend. His phone buzzed, a notification that $500,000 had been transferred to Rachel's account. Wesley had paid. Smart choice, though it wouldn't save him in the end. Min-seok didn't deal in redemption, he dealt in balance, and the scales were so far tilted in the Bonners' favor that it would take more than money to set them right. It would take blood. The journalist's name was Marcus Chen, and he had a reputation for burning sources who wasted his time. He had exposed senators, CEOs, and cartel bosses with equal enthusiasm. His articles read like indictments, every sentence backed by documentation so thorough that lawsuits died before they reached court. Min-seok met him in a parking garage at midnight. Marcus arrived alone, as instructed, carrying nothing but a leather messenger bag and a recording device he didn't bother hiding. "You said you had something on Bonner Industries," Marcus said without preamble. "I've been investigating them for 2 years. Every lead goes cold, every witness recants, every document gets sealed by friendly judges." He studied Min-seok with the practiced cynicism of someone who'd been lied to by experts. "So why should I trust you?" Min-seok handed him a USB drive. "Because I'm giving you what you couldn't find on your own. Server data from Bonner Industries, financial records,
Internal communications, shipping manifests from their textile operations overseas, and evidence of a human trafficking network operating out of their domestic warehouses." Marcus took the drive but didn't look at it. "Where did you get this?" "Does it matter?" "It matters if it's fabricated. If this is some corporate espionage play, I'm not interested in being your weapon." Min-seok respected that. Integrity was rare enough that he could appreciate it even when it complicated his plans. "The data is real. Verify it yourself. Cross-reference the shipping manifests with customs records. Check the financial transactions against public filings. Interview the people whose names appear in those documents." He paused. "And look into Keisha Rollins, reporter who went missing after investigating them. I think you'll find she discovered what's on that drive. And I think the Bonners made her disappear to protect it." Marcus's expression shifted. Not much, but enough. The name meant something to him. "I knew Keisha. We worked together on a story about wage theft in Queens. She was good, careful, not the type to just vanish." He pocketed the USB drive. "If this checks out, it'll destroy them. The stock price alone will crater when this goes public. You understand that?" "I'm counting on it." "Why?" Marcus asked. "What did they do to you?" Min-seok didn't answer. He simply turned and walked toward the exit, his footsteps echoing in the concrete space. Behind him, Marcus stood holding a drive that contained the end of an empire, though he didn't know it yet. 3 days later, the first article dropped. Marcus had worked fast, verified everything, built a case that could withstand legal assault, and published it in an outlet known for investigative journalism that ended careers. The headline read, "Bonner Industries, a legacy built on stolen labor and human suffering." The stock market opened that morning, and Bonner Industries shares immediately plummeted. By noon, they'd lost 40% of their value. By closing bell, trading had been halted pending investigation. Victor Bonner held an emergency press conference denying everything, but the evidence was already spreading across social media, news networks, and regulatory agencies. Min-seok watched it unfold from his office, a glass of whiskey in his hand. The first domino had fallen. The rest would follow in sequence, each one carefully positioned to ensure maximum damage. His phone rang, one of his lieutenants. "We found her." The warehouse sat in an industrial zone near the port, surrounded by chain-link fencing and security cameras that hadn't worked in months. Min-seok had studied the layout for 2 days, guard rotations, entry points, the location of every worker inside. He'd mobilized a team of 8 men, all former military, all loyal to him in ways that transcended money or fear. They went in at 3 a.m.,
dressed in black, faces covered, moving with the silent precision of soldiers who'd conducted such operations in places most people couldn't find on a map. Min-seok led from the front, a pistol in his hand, though he hoped not to use it. Violence was sometimes necessary, but it was always expensive. The guards at the front gate went down without firing a shot. Tranquilizer darts, fast-acting, leaving them unconscious before they could trigger alarms. The team moved through the exterior checkpoint and into the warehouse itself, spreading out in practiced formations. Inside, the air stank of sweat, chemicals, and desperation. Rows of sewing machines stretched across the floor, most of them idle at this hour. But in the back section, behind a locked door, Min-seok found what he was looking for. 38 people, mostly women, a few men, ranging from teenagers to middle-aged. They slept on thin mattresses on a concrete floor, clustered together for warmth. The windows were barred, the door had been locked from the outside. A single bathroom served all of them, the plumbing barely functional. This was where the Bonners sent people who asked too many questions, where they disappeared witnesses, where they warehoused human beings like inventory. Rachel Rollins sat in the far corner, her back against the wall, eyes closed but not sleeping. She looked thinner than her photograph, older somehow, worn down by months of captivity. When Min-seok's team entered, she didn't scream. She just opened her eyes and watched them with the hollow expression of someone who'd stopped expecting rescue. "Rachel Rollins?" Min-seok asked quietly, kneeling beside her. She nodded slowly, like the movement took effort. "Your sister sent me. Not true, but close enough. We're getting you out." Something flickered in her eyes then. Not hope, not yet, but maybe the memory of what hope used to feel like. There are others. They brought them from Vietnam, Guatemala, the Philippines, promised them jobs, legal work permits, then trapped them here. "I know," Min-seok gestured to his team. "We're taking everyone." They moved fast after that. The team escorted the captives to waiting vans outside, while Min-seok stayed behind to document everything. Photographs of the conditions, the locked doors, the meager food supplies. Evidence for the prosecutors who would need it later. As they loaded the last person into the vans, Min-seok heard sirens in the distance. Not police, his contacts would have warned him. This was something else. He turned to see 3 black SUVs racing toward the warehouse. No lights, moving with aggressive intent. Victor Bonner's private security, the kind of men who didn't ask questions or worry about laws. Min-seok's lieutenant looked at him. "Orders?" "Get them out of here," Min-seok said calmly. "I'll handle this." The vans pulled away as the SUVs screeched to a halt. 12 men emerged, all armed, all trained. They fanned out in a practiced formation, weapons raised. Min-seok stood alone in the warehouse entrance, hands at his sides, perfectly still. He'd been outnumbered before. He'd been outgunned before. Neither had ever been the deciding factor. The lead security officer, a square-jawed man with military bearing, stepped forward. "You're trespassing on private property. Put your hands up and get on the ground." Min-seok smiled. Not the friendly smile he'd given Wesley, but something colder, more honest. "You work for Victor Bonner, which means you know who I am, which means that knowing that pointing guns at me is the last mistake you'll ever make." The lead security officer hesitated. His team shifted uneasily. "Walk away," Min-seok said quietly. "Tell your employer that his secrets are no longer safe. Tell him that the people he hurt are free. Tell him that consequence is coming." He took a step forward. The security team took a step back. "Or don't walk away. Pull those triggers, see what happens next. But know this, before your bodies are cold, 50 of my people will descend on everyone you've ever loved. Your families, your friends, your hidden bank accounts, and your escape plans. Everything you think is safe will burn." The lead security officer's hand trembled slightly. He'd done the math. Whatever Bonner was paying him, it wasn't enough for this. "Stand down," he said to his team.
They lowered their weapons and retreated to the SUVs. Within seconds, they were gone, leaving Min-seok alone in the warehouse with only the evidence of the Bonner family's crimes. He pulled out his phone and made a call. Send the anonymous tip to the FBI. Include the location and the documentation. Tell them they'll want to move fast before the evidence disappears. By dawn, federal agents would swarm this warehouse. By the end of the week, indictments would be filed, and the Bonner family's empire would begin its final collapse. Min-seok walked to his car, the morning sun just beginning to rise over the port. Rachel's sister was safe. 37 other people were free. The scales were starting to balance. But this wasn't finished. Not yet. Wesley and Victor Bonner still walked free, still believed their money could protect them from consequences. Min-seok would teach them otherwise. The war had just begun. Victor Bonner didn't build a billion-dollar empire by accepting defeat gracefully. When the FBI raided his warehouse and the stock price crashed, when journalists camped outside his headquarters and senators who'd taken his money suddenly refused his calls, he did what men like him always did when cornered. He went to war. The first attack came on a Tuesday night. 3 of Min-seok's legitimate businesses, a restaurant in Koreatown, an import warehouse near the docks, and a nightclub in the financial district, erupted in flames within 20 minutes of each other. Professional arson, coordinated timing meant to send a message. Fire marshals would find accelerants, insurance investigators would ask questions, but no one would find evidence pointing back to Victor Bonner. Except Min-seok didn't need evidence. He knew. The second attack was more personal. A team of hired contractors, not amateurs, but professionals pulled from the kind of private military firms that operated in legal gray zones, hit one of Min-seok's gambling operations in Queens. They came in fast, weapons drawn, intending to make an example. What they didn't know was that Min-seok had anticipated this exact scenario. His people were ready. The firefight lasted 90 seconds and ended with 3 contractors dead and the rest fleeing into the night. But the third attack was the one that changed everything. Rachel Rollins had been recovering in the private hospital Min-seok had arranged, her burns healing slowly but steadily under the care of specialists who asked no questions about who was paying the bills. She'd been visited by her sister Keisha, reunited after months of terror and uncertainty. They'd cried together, held each other, made plans for a future that suddenly seemed possible again. Min-seok had stationed 2 guards outside her room, discreet but vigilant. They checked every nurse, every doctor, every orderly who approached. But Victor Bonner's people were patient. They waited 3 days, studying patterns, identifying weaknesses. And when a night shift nurse called in sick, they sent a replacement, a woman with impeccable credentials, a warm smile, and a syringe full of potassium chloride hidden in her uniform pocket. She made it past the guards, made it into Rachel's room, had the syringe in her hand, and was reaching for the IV line when Rachel woke up and screamed. The guards burst through the door. The fake nurse tried to run but didn't make it 5 steps. They subdued her, called Min-seok, and locked down the entire floor, while security footage was pulled and analyzed. Min-seok arrived within 10 minutes. He watched the footage 3 times, the woman entering, the guards distracted by a janitor who'd started a conversation at precisely the right moment, the near miss that would have stopped Rachel's heart and been ruled a tragic medical complication. He stood in Rachel's room afterward, watching her sleep under sedation, her sister holding her hand. The machines beeped steadily, monitoring vitals that had come within seconds of flatlining. "Find Wesley Bonner," Min-seok said to his lieutenant, his voice quiet and absolutely lethal. "I bring him to me. I don't care how." "What about Victor?" "He'll come looking for his sons soon enough, but first, Wesley and I need to have a conversation about consequences." The Meridian Tower was one of the city's most secure buildings. Biometric scanners, armed security in the lobby, cameras on every floor. Residents paid $20,000 a month for the privilege of feeling untouchable in their climate-controlled penthouses 40 stories above the chaos of street-level reality. Min-seok walked through the front entrance at 11 p.m. wearing a maintenance uniform and carrying a toolbox. The security guard at the desk barely glanced at him, just another technician here to fix someone's overpriced appliances. The work order had been filed hours earlier, complete with authorization codes and a callback number that would reach a real property management office if anyone bothered to verify. No one did. He took the service elevator to the 42nd floor. The hallway was empty, silent except for the whisper of expensive air conditioning. Unit 4207 sat at the end, its door equipped with a biometric lock that cost more than most people's cars. He knelt beside it, opened his toolbox, and removed a device that looked like a tablet but functioned as something far more sophisticated: military-grade electronics, the kind that shouldn't exist in civilian hands. He connected it to the lock's external panel and waited while algorithms cycled through possibilities. 30 seconds later, the lock clicked open. Inside, Wesley's penthouse was exactly what Min-seok had anticipated: floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, modern furniture that prioritized aesthetics over comfort, art on the walls that cost 6 figures and communicated nothing. The space felt sterile, lifeless, like a hotel suite dressed up to resemble a home. Wesley sat in his living room, drink in hand, staring at his phone. He looked older than he did a week ago. The stress was showing: dark circles under his eyes, tremor in his hands, the haunted expression of someone who'd realized too late that money couldn't buy safety. He sensed movement and looked up, saw Min-seok standing in his doorway. The glass fell from his hand and shattered on the marble floor. "How did you—" "The security." Wesley stumbled backward, reaching for his phone. Min-seok moved faster. He crossed the room in 3 strides, plucked the phone from Wesley's grip, and crushed it beneath his heel. "Your father tried to kill Rachel Rollins tonight, sent an assassin to her hospital room. She survived because my people were watching." He stepped closer. "But the fact that he tried means our arrangement has changed." "I didn't know. I had nothing to do with—" "You're his son. You benefit from every crime he commits, every person he destroys, every life he ruins to add another 0 to his net worth." Min-seok's voice remained calm, conversational, which somehow made it more terrifying. "You poured scalding food on a waitress because you could, because in your world, people like Rachel don't matter. They're just obstacles, inconveniences, things to be discarded when they fail to serve you properly."
Wesley backed against the window, trapped. "What do you want? More money? I want you to understand consequence. Real consequence. The kind your money has protected you from your entire life." Min-seok pulled a syringe from his jacket. Not the poison that had been meant for Rachel, but a fast-acting sedative. "We're going to take a drive. You're going to see something, and then you're going to make a choice." "I'll scream. The neighbors will—" Min-seok grabbed Wesley's wrist with one hand and injected the sedative with the other. "No, you won't." Wesley's eyes went wide. He tried to fight it, tried to stay conscious, but the drug was pharmaceutical grade and worked within seconds. His knees buckled. Min-seok caught him before he hit the floor, lifting him with practiced ease. He carried Wesley to the service elevator, past cameras that had mysteriously malfunctioned, past security guards who'd been paid to take extended breaks. By the time anyone realized Wesley Bonner was missing, Min-seok would be long gone. In Wesley's penthouse, a single playing card sat on the coffee table, the Ace of Spades, a calling card that meant nothing to most people but would send a very specific message to Victor Bonner when he found it. The monster had arrived, and his son was gone. Wesley woke in darkness, complete, absolute darkness, the kind that made you question whether your eyes were even open. He tried to move and found his wrists bound to a chair, not painfully tight, but secure enough that struggling would be pointless. Panic surged through him. He opened his mouth to scream and heard his own voice echo back from close walls. A small room, soundproofed, probably. Screaming would accomplish nothing except making his throat raw. Lights flickered on, not bright, just enough to see. He was in an office of some kind, stripped of furniture except for the chair he occupied and a desk in front of him. Min-seok sat behind the desk, his gray suit still immaculate, his tattooed neck catching the dim light. "Where am I?" Wesley's voice cracked. "Somewhere your father's people won't find you. Somewhere you and I can have an honest conversation." Min-seok placed a laptop on the desk and turned it to face Wesley. "I want to show you something." The screen came to life. Photographs. Dozens of them. The warehouse where Keisha and the others had been held. Concrete floors, barred windows, the desperation captured in every frame. Close-ups of the workers' faces, their injuries, their malnourished bodies. "These are your father's victims," Min-seok said quietly. "People he imprisoned, people he enslaved. Some of them are children, Wesley. Teenagers promised jobs and educations, then trapped in factories where they worked 16-hour days for no pay." Wesley turned his head away. "I didn't know about any of this." "You didn't want to know. There's a difference." Min-seok clicked to the next image. Financial records, shipping manifests, emails with Victor Bonner's name in the header. "Your family's wealth comes from this, from stolen labor, from human suffering. You've spent your entire life enjoying luxuries purchased with blood." The images kept coming. A girl who couldn't have been more than 15, burns on her hands from machinery. A man with scars across his back from beatings when he tried to escape. An elderly woman who died of untreated pneumonia in the warehouse because getting her medical care might have exposed the operation. Wesley's stomach churned. "Stop, please." "Why?" Min-seok's voice remained calm. "Because it makes you uncomfortable, because you'd rather not face what your money costs." He leaned forward. "Rachel Rollins almost became one of these photographs. Your father tried to make her disappear because she was inconvenient, because she'd seen too much, because people like you and him view human beings as expendable." "What do you want from me?" Wesley whispered. Min-seok placed 3 items on the desk between them: a pistol, a USB drive, and a legal document. "Choice," he said. "The gun contains 1 bullet. You can use it on yourself, take the coward's way out, and I'll make sure your father joins you within the week. Or," he tapped the USB drive, "this contains your father's complete financial records, proof of every crime, every bribe, every victim. You can take it to the federal prosecutors and testify against your father. Cooperate fully. Help dismantle everything he built." "He'll kill me." "He'll try, but I'll make sure he fails. You'll have protection, witness security, a chance to do one decent thing in your worthless life." Min-seok picked up the legal document. "This transfers your personal assets, the offshore accounts, the trust funds, the real estate, into a foundation for the survivors. Rachel's sister will help run it. They'll use your money to rebuild the lives you helped destroy." Wesley stared at the 3 objects. His hands shook. "And if I refuse? If I won't choose?" "Then I choose for you, and you won't like my choice." Min-seok stood, buttoning his suit jacket. "You have 1 minute to decide. Redemption or oblivion? The gum or the drive? Choose." The silence stretched. Wesley looked at the photographs still displayed on the laptop screen, saw the faces of people whose names he'd never know, whose suffering had funded his penthouse and his cars and his casual cruelty. He thought about Rachel's scream when the scalding food hit her skin, how he laughed, how he felt nothing but amusement at her pain. With trembling hands, he reached for the USB drive. The federal courthouse filled to capacity on the day Wesley Bonner took the stand. News crews packed the hallway, protesters gathered outside with signs demanding justice. Inside, prosecutors presented a case built on Wesley's testimony and the mountains of evidence he'd provided: financial records, emails, recordings, enough documentation to bury the Bonner family for generations.
Wesley sat in the witness box, looking diminished, hollowed out, nothing like the arrogant man who'd poured hot food on a waitress. He answered every question, named names, explained schemes, detailed his father's criminal empire with the precision of someone who'd finally accepted that cooperation was his only path to survival. Victor Bonner sat at the defense table, his expensive lawyers whispering urgently, but even they could see the writing on the wall. When your own son testifies against you, when the evidence is overwhelming, when federal prosecutors smell blood, there's no amount of money that can save you. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Victor Bonner showed no emotion when the verdict was read. He probably expected it. Men like him always believed they were untouchable, right up until the moment the cell door closed. The judge sentenced him to life in federal prison without possibility of parole. Asset forfeiture would strip him of every dollar, every property, every trace of the empire he'd built on suffering. Wesley, for his cooperation, received 5 years in a minimum security facility. Not justice, perhaps, but something. A price paid for the life he lived and the people he hurt.
Min-seok watched from the gallery, anonymous among the crowd. When the sentences were handed down, he stood and left without ceremony. His work here was done. 6 months later, Rachel Rollins stood in the lobby of a newly renovated building in downtown Brooklyn. The sign above the entrance read, "Restoration Foundation, supporting survivors of human trafficking." She wore a professional blazer, her burns healed to scars she no longer tried to hide. Keisha stood beside her, clipboard in hand, directing movers carrying furniture for the foundation's offices. Around them, some of the 37 people rescued from the warehouse worked alongside professional staff, preparing to help others who'd suffered as they had. The foundation's funding came from the complete liquidation of Wesley Bonner's personal assets and a substantial portion of Victor's seized wealth. $73 million transformed from instruments of oppression into tools of healing. Min-seok arrived unannounced, as was his way. He wore a different suit but carried himself with the same quiet certainty. Rachel saw him and crossed the lobby, her expression complicated, gratitude mixed with awareness of who and what he was. "I wanted to thank you," she said quietly, "for everything, for saving my sister, for this," she gestured at the building around them, "for giving us a chance to do something meaningful with what happened to us." "The money was never really theirs," Min-seok replied, "just returning it to its rightful purpose." "Is that what you tell yourself?" Rachel asked, not unkindly, "that you're just balancing scales?" "It's what I know." He glanced around the lobby, seeing the activity, the hope, the lives being rebuilt. "You'll do good work here. Help people who have no one else. That matters more than anything I could do with money." Keisha approached, recognized Min-seok, and stopped a respectful distance away. The sisters exchanged a look, complex, understanding, acknowledging the truth that sometimes justice came from unexpected sources. "Will we see you again?" Rachel asked. "Probably not. I don't belong in places like this." Min-seok offered a slight smile. "But I'll know the work continues. That's enough." He turned to leave, then paused. "The man who hurt you, Wesley Bonner, he made a choice in the end. Not a brave one, perhaps, but the right one. Sometimes that's all we can hope for, that people choose correctly when consequence finally arrives." "And his father?" "Victor Bonner will die in prison. His empire is dismantled. His name is synonymous with everything he tried to hide." Min-seok's expression didn't change. The scales are balanced. He walked out of the building into the afternoon sun. A car waited at the curb, driver ready, the city sprawling around them with all its chaos and beauty and endless capacity for both cruelty and redemption.
Min-seok had other work waiting, other scales to balance, other people who believed themselves untouchable, learning that consequence always arrived, eventually, for those patient enough to deliver it. But for today, in this moment, justice had been served. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough. The Korean Mafia boss disappeared into traffic, leaving behind a foundation built on recovered wealth, and two sisters who would spend their lives helping others escape the darkness he'd pulled them from. In the end, perhaps that was the only redemption any of them could hope for, not erasing the past, but building something better from its ruins. The story didn't end with Wesley Bonner pouring hot food on a waitress. It ended with that waitress standing in a lobby full of survivors, ready to fight for people the world had forgotten. And somewhere in the city, a man with a tattooed neck and perfectly tailored suit moved through shadows, watching, waiting, ensuring that balance was maintained. Because someone had to. And Min-seok had been doing this work long before Rachel Rollins screamed in a cafe, and would continue long after. The scales never stayed balanced for long, but that was fine. He was patient, and consequence always found its target. Always.